I am woman, hear me roar, in numbers too big to ignore, and I know too much to go back to pretend.
Shows like The Simpsons, Family Guy, and South Park have been around for years, and over the course of their prolific runs, there have been a handful of episodes featuring characters behaving in a manner that would be considered mean-spirited. I've seen videos from YouTubers such as LS Mark and Simpsons Theory that have covered certain episodes of the aforementioned shows, and they would express displeasure with characters behaving in a mean-spirited manner. But are mean-spirited characters really a problem? Now, this is not a critique on LS Mark or Simpsons Theory. I actually enjoy their content and respect that they have their own opinions of what they consider mean-spirited. I only brought them up because it's related to this video and what inspired me to make this video. So when I think of mean-spirited characters in certain shows like The Simpsons or Family Guy, I don't necessarily consider it a bad thing because it ultimately comes down to the context of why or who is acting mean-spirited. And I'm going to mainly focus on The Simpsons and Family Guy while I try to explain all of this. But first, I quickly want to clarify that when it comes to modern Simpsons or Family Guy, I occasionally see clips of episodes here and there, and that's basically it. Personally speaking, I feel like the quality has been dipping drastically for years now. However, when it comes to characters being mean-spirited, there's enough of it in past seasons of both shows that we can go by. Now that's out of the way, back to mean-spirited characters and how it's not necessarily a bad thing. So take Meg in Family Guy for example. She's usually treated like shit. Her family is verbally and physically abusive to her. All of this abuse puts Meg's character down, and it's all done for the sake of laughs, and while I can see how people would feel that way, seeing how it's Family Guy of all shows, I find it hard to see how this would drag an episode down. If you ask me, Family Guy has some pretty poorly written characters, especially characters like Meg and Chris. On top of that, most of the characters in Family Guy are either treated poorly by one another or can't decide if they are assholes in one episode and a good Samaritan in the next. Another reason why I don't think mean-spirited characters in Family Guy are a real issue is because the show has always been about bombastic, crude humor. It's what separated itself from The Simpsons, and it's one of the reasons why it got cancelled a few times. That and also its poor ratings at the time. This could also apply to South Park, but to be fair, the writing is far better. Characters are more fleshed out, and the kids usually learn some sort of moral by the end of an episode, no matter how unlikely it may be. Everything wraps up nicely, unlike Family Guy that tends to never get too deep or outright has episodes end with no true resolution or catharsis. That is, unless of course it's to promote an experimental vaccine aggressively promoted by a certain political party. As for The Simpsons, well, it's definitely less mean-spirited compared to Family Guy. However, there are instances where characters will be portrayed in a mean-spirited way. One example being Homer, who would be dubbed Jerk-Ass Homer by most fans, and that label would get tossed around depending on how his character is written. Homer's mean-spirited behavior could have something to do with his lack of awareness and overall dim-witted nature. He doesn't fully understand the cause and effect of his actions, and when he does, it's already too late, thus resulting in him having to repair the damage he caused from his actions. Other characters, such as Bart, exhibit mean-spirited behavior at times. Sometimes his rebellious antics and stubbornness makes him an unlikable character, at least to some. For me though, I view it as a kid growing up and being rowdy. Of course, it's tamed compared to his contemporaries. Still, Bart is not meant to be the perfect kid. Same goes for Homer. He's not the perfect husband or father. He's flawed, but deep down, he has a good heart. And just like many of us, we have moments where we act mean-spirited, and we can drag a conversation down or screw up sometimes. But a moment of mean-spirited behavior does not always define who we are, or in this instance, it doesn't always define a character or an episode in a show. I understand that a character or characters being mean-spirited can be off-putting, but I think the context is important as to why this is the case. However, If it's poorly implemented in an episode to generate interest or create emotion from the viewer, then it comes across as a cheap gimmick that the creators want us to care about the character that's being treated unfairly without there being any real character development. In these cases, that's when the mean-spirited behavior takes away from an episode in a show. Now, if the show in question develops characters, sets up scenes properly, and builds lore within the show's universe, and then has characters acting mean-spirited, then it makes sense because the context made it logical rather than nonsensical. An example of this can be seen in Dragon Ball Z when Piccolo trains Gohan during the Namek arc. Furthermore, if a show is built around characters being rude or vulgar with inconsistent character development and plots that go nowhere and are usually meant for cheap laughs, yet oddly virtue signals, then I think a character being mean-spirited isn't the main perpetrator of what brings an episode down. This is all not to say my opinion on this is absolute. All I'm trying to say is that a character being mean-spirited may not be that far-fetched to how they are written or the overall tone of the show in question. Besides, a mean-spirited character could result in there being a satisfying payoff at the end of an episode. I guess it depends on the show. Either way, I think if handled correctly, mean-spirited characters could be a good plot device to help develop a character and give an episode more meaning. But I think some of us need to accept that not every show is created equally and not every scenario will have a satisfying conclusion. But when they do, it definitely makes some of the meaner scenes worth it. One example comes to mind. While it's not a show, it's still worth talking about of how to handle mean-spirited characters. The movie Matilda made the principal, Miss Trunchbull, a nasty and vicious character that ultimately helped develop the main character, Matilda. With Miss Trunchbull's behavior towards everyone in the movie allowed the viewers to root for Matilda and made the movie more satisfying because the dynamic between Matilda and Miss Trunchbull. That movie shows how mean-spirited characters can work if done correctly, and I highly recommend anyone give it a watch. In fact, writers for these shows could learn something from Matilda and how mean-spirited characters can play a major role in the plot and make some memorable moments, which is something a lot of these ongoing shows need more of.
I'm gonna dance on your corpse right now! Doodle-boo!